with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, January 9th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Mark Joseph Stern, writer at Slate.com, on how the Supreme Court will manage Donald Trump's insurrectionary presidential campaign, and Idaho's abortion ban. Meanwhile, Trump in appeals court at this very moment, looking for immunity from his attempts to overturn the 2020 election. Blinken is in Israel as protest grows across the U.S. Over 300 people arrested yesterday in New York.
Good job, folks.
For protesting the ongoing slaughter in Gaza. Freedom Caucus fuming about the government funding deal as Matt's Gatesgate looking increasingly like it was completely for nothing. And a government shutdown may loom once again. Speaking of shutting down, Earth shattered global heat record in 2023. Dangerously close to that 1.5 degrees Celsius that we were supposedly going to stop with the Paris Accords. Of course, we pulled out of those for about 4 years. Nikki Haley closing the gap on that guy who pulled us out of the Paris Accords in New Hampshire, supposedly. We'll see how she does tomorrow night in the debate, which we are covering. Woo. Republican House and Senate. I said Republicans in House and Republicans in Senate can't decide whether they want to impeach Mayorkas or make a deal
Embrace
with him.
him.
I don't know. Marry? I don't know.
Yeah.
Impeach or marry. Researchers find nanoplastics in bottled water. Wonderful. X, or Twix, purges journalists and leftists, ones you probably read. No one's quite sure why, but apparently over their criticism of Israel's slaughter in Gaza. Florida Republican chair ousted amidst a rape accusation. His calls continue for his wife to be booted. The Moms of Liberty head who had some indiscretions according to everything that Moms of Liberty stand for. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is
Newsday Tuesday.
Newsday Tuesday. As I'm not even going to pretend like you were trying to mock me on that.
No,
one.
I'm not. I'm just going to.
It was a little bit of an impersonation.
A child's character voice.
Yeah. Maybe, I let that was some private joking. Sometimes I'll use that voice with my significant other. I don't know why I'm revealing that right now.
That's weird.
But you say a phrase so many times, it becomes like just move on.
Are you
Forget
okay?
it. Yeah. No, I used the wrong voice.
right.
Hello.
Code switch.
We got a lot to get to today. We got Mark Joseph Stern just for a portion of the show, just to cover a couple of these cases that are happening. And we got a lot of clips. There's just a lot happening right now. Between the 47 court cases involving Donald Trump, and everything from a Jack Smith and Chutkin, the lawyer, the judge in the documents case. Both of them apparently have been swatted over the past couple of weeks, presumably by Trump supporters. Yeah. But I mean, we don't know for sure, obviously, but it would make sense. Never. What's her name? There's allegations that Fannie Willis,
the Fulton County DA,
improperly hired a love interest as one of the prosecutors in the Trump case.
Yeah,
which it's just an allegation at this point, but
what a time to be sloppy. I mean,
come on, man.
Yeah. It's like only, a career-defining case.
I just don't understand how people think that they, I can get involved in one of the more significant legal cases in the history of the country, and no one's going to pay attention to me.
Because YOLO.
Yeah, exactly. But let's get to this. I found this really impressive. Like I said, 325 people arrested in New York City yesterday, protesting at different bridges and tunnels. And this is a really important protest that took place yesterday. Joe Biden was in the AME Church.
The Mother Emanuel AME Church.
Yeah, you'll recall, this is the church where there was a shooting 6 years ago. I can't remember when.
I don't know.
Maybe it was longer than that.
Yeah.
He is there, obviously, campaigning South Carolina, a state where he basically won or began his winning of the Democratic primary in 2020.
And has now moved it to first in the primary order.
Yes. And here he is trying to solidify his black support in the Democratic Party, obviously in a very hugely important constituency of the Democrats. I mean, and really the only way that he's going to win if he is able to motivate black voters to come out and vote. But South Carolina tends to be a little bit more conservative, even amongst the black population there. And also much of his support comes from folks who are a little bit older. Not necessarily older than me, but older than people under 40, let's say. And here are some ceasefire now protesters. And what's really amazing about this is how the rest of the audience, if you will, responds. It's disturbing in some respects. It's fascinating as well. And essentially, the ceasefire now protesters have more or less said, wherever Joe Biden goes, you're going to see these protests, which is good. He should be feeling the pressure about this. And here is that clip.
If you really care about the lives lost here, you should honor the lives lost and vote for a ceasefire in Palestine. Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right.
Thank you. Look, folks, I understand their passion. and I've been quietly working. With the Israeli government to get them to reduce and significantly get out of Gaza. I'm using all that I can to do that.
So,
quiet is the right word for it.
There's a couple of things going on here that are sort of worth commenting on. First off, the 4 more years response to a call for a ceasefire. I mean, I get what they're trying to say. We support Joe Biden, but they obviously, when someone says stop this slaughter of thousands of innocent civilian people, and your response is 4 more years, you're not listening.
Yeah.
And I will give Biden credit at least for, not sort of going with the moment and saying, well, hold on. I understand why they're doing this. But the pathological lie that he is wed to, that he's doing everything. What did he say at the end? Everything I can.
Yeah.
And it's just simply not the case. And no one believes this anymore.
And to get out of Gaza, I mean, Itamar Ben-Gvir said 2 days ago that resettling Gaza and the ethnic cleansing of Gaza via voluntary migration or emigration or whatever the phrase he uses is the goal of the Israeli government. How is he not taking these high-ranking Israeli officials at their word?
It is. It's just pathological. I mean, I can understand there are some people in this country who believe that Gaza should be leveled and that Palestinians are not human beings, and then bombing them. But the idea that there's anybody who genuinely believes that Joe Biden is doing everything he can while essentially flinging open the barn doors with weapons,
circumventing Congress to do so
on twice, and that is not even to mention what we had talked about, prior to the break, about U.S. Storing weapons in Israel as it does in other places around the world, and essentially the Israelis having an open door policy, come in and take what you want, as if it's like fill up your shopping carts and. Give yourself only 30 minutes, but come back anytime you want. There is the idea that there's this type of pressure when we have vetoed multiple attempts to have a ceasefire at the UN Security Council. We have there is nothing that we have done to not essentially blunt the calls for a ceasefire in this country. And Joe Biden is now a month out from when a former prime minister of Israel called for a total ceasefire.
Yeah.
And he won't even do it. And it's I don't care what words he uses. The leverages he has with the weapons.
Yeah. I mean, it's jarring, but the hope is like that crowd is older, and that's borne out in poll numbers that older people are not as sympathetic with the Palestinian people, but younger voters or younger activists who are doing that kind of action understand there is a connection between white supremacist violence at home and like Western imperial aggression abroad, and the dehumanization of the Palestinian people. Those go hand in hand.
But again, like I can't imagine there isn't somebody in that church who today isn't feeling a little bit gross.
I got to say,
for getting caught up in a 4 more years chant, right, when they realize that they're chanting to drown out people who are saying stop the mass murder that is taking place.
And the hunger and starvation and malnutrition.
There's a Rorschach test there. Simone Sanders got on Twitter saying, how dare they protest Joe Biden in that church? And I think actually it's okay to own how we're offended as well. And how dare you try to use that church and what happened there and the surroundings as a shield for this politician who is actively supporting slaughter right now.
Yeah, it's disgusting. I mean, it was a real disgusting response.
One for the time capsule.
Yep.
Yeah.
But good for those protesters, and looking
it up.
forward to seeing them in other places. We're going to talk to Mark Joseph Stern in just a moment. But first, a word from our sponsor. New year, some people looking to reinvent themselves. Don't do that. I got an easier way. You can revive yourself with some Liquid IV.
Oh.
Yep. Here it is. I never really have to really do much for these ads. I literally...
You use all the products.
I use the product literally every day. It is sitting on my desk.
Mm-hmm.
It is the one thing that is a complete, like, immutable truth. There has been one time in the past, I think, like, I don't know, maybe it's been twice over the past 5 or 6 years where I have not had one of these balls here, and I freak out when I realize, like, I didn't prepare for myself. Liquid IV has 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, has 8 vitamins and nutrients for everyday wellness. Liquid IV hydrates 2 times faster than water alone, and all in a single, you ready for this, sugar-free stick. So you can feel hydrated, revived, and ready to take on 2024. Liquid IV has 1 stick plus 16 ounces of water. It, again, hydrates you better, twice as well as water alone. 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink. It has no artificial sweeteners. And are you ready for this? 0 sugar. We got 3 flavors with the 0 sugar. 8 vitamins and nutrients for everyday wellness. Non-GMO, free from gluten, dairy, and soy. I don't know what to tell you. I take these on when I take trips onto planes because it's a little packet. I was so psyched when they started to, because apparently it's very difficult to find a way to transmit electrolytes without sugar. I don't know the science, but they did. 3 great flavors: peach, grape, and lemon lime. And I imagine they're going to bring out more too. They still have the old ones too, which are great. But for me, if I'm flying anywhere, if I'm going anywhere, if I'm going to, I don't know, softball season, it doesn't matter. But on a daily basis, this is the way I keep hydrated, and it's great. Revive yourself for the new year. Grab your Liquid IV Hydration Multiplier sugar-free in bulk nationwide at Costco, or get 20% off your first order when you go to liquidiv.com. Use the code MajorityRep, not Majority Report, MajorityRep at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MajorityRep at liquidiv.com. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Mark Joseph Stern to get the breakdown on this case that may determine whether Donald Trump is eligible for the ballot, at the very least in Colorado and Maine, but it may be picked up in other places. And we'll also talk to him about this case that the Supreme Court is going to hear about insurrection, about the abortion ban there, and whether hospitals that take Medicare patients, which is just about almost all of them, are obligated to provide emergency abortions for women who need them. I know that sounds absurd that we're even phrasing it that way. That's where we've landed on, but that's where we're at. All right, quick break. We'll be right back after this. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. Always a pleasure to welcome back to the program Mark Joseph Stern. He is a politics writer at Slate.com. What is your official title there?
I am a senior writer for Slate covering courts and the law.
There you go. Senior writer for Slate, courts and the law. So forgive me of that. And really appreciate your joining us. Supreme Court is, and they don't seem like they're in a big hurry to be adjudicating the question as to whether the leading contender for the Republican nomination is allowed to even run for president because of his involvement in what I think anyone reasonable would have to call an insurrection, or, I think even arguably a coup attempt in some respects. But walk us through. This is all centered around the 14th Amendment, Section 3. Colorado has deemed Trump ineligible for the general election. Same too with Maine, is my understanding. What are the implications of this case? Will it affect other states? If the Supreme, but go ahead.
Sure. So, the Colorado Supreme Court and the Maine Secretary of State have both held that Donald Trump cannot appear on the ballot under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And that reasoning applies to both the primary and the general election. Okay. Section 3 has a provision which states that any person who has previously taken the oath of office and then engages in insurrection or rebellion against the United States is disqualified from holding any office, civil or military, in the future unless Congress grants him amnesty by a 2/3 vote. Now, as you said, I think it's very clear that Trump engaged in insurrection. He incited the attack on the Capitol. He fomented the obstruction of counting of electoral votes. The deeper questions here really, I think, involve the process by which Trump could be knocked off the ballot. And you sort of hinted at that just a second ago. I think it's the right question to ask. We have Colorado and Maine rendering these decisions. What about other states like Michigan, for instance? Well, in those states, there's not as clear a path for voters to challenge someone's inclusion on the ballot. And so those courts have not allowed Trump to be knocked off the ballot or even seriously entertained the question. And this may be the biggest issue here. Congress has not laid out any clear procedure by which a insurrectionist can be taken off the ballot anywhere. And so one of Trump's main arguments is that Congress needs to pass some kind of statute explaining how the 14th Amendment should be enforced here. And that even if that's not right, that he wasn't afforded due process in Maine or in Colorado, that he deserved like a full trial, a fuller hearing, more notice and process before he was removed from the ballot. And those are the questions that the Supreme Court's going to confront in exactly 1 month.
We had a caller yesterday who called in and told us that there was part of Section 3 that was actually repealed by Congress in the wake of Reconstruction that presumably was a mechanism in which to determine if someone was an insurrectionist. Like, this was passed specifically in response to the Civil War and to people who were fighting for the South, for the Confederacy. They were engaging in insurrection against the United States of America. And then there was part that was repealed that ostensibly was about, like, what was it? Was it defining who was in that, or that made it that in some ways it seems to me made it more applicable to Donald Trump than less, but go ahead.
So Congress can't repeal a constitutional amendment on its own, right? That's not legally possible. But what Congress did during Reconstruction was pass a very broad amnesty act. Remember before I said that Congress could lift this restriction by a 2/3 vote? Congress enacted by a 2/3 vote this sweeping amnesty for Confederates who had participated in the Civil War. Basically, had a bit of a change of heart. More racists were in Congress. Everybody wanted the North and the South to get along so they could go back to being racist together. And Congress said, we're just going to let these former Confederates do whatever they want, pretty much, including run for and hold public office. So we're going to grant very broad amnesty to all of them. Now, the argument that I think this caller made, which is one that Trump has made as well, is that the Amnesty Act that Congress enacted back then projects forward indefinitely. That Congress didn't just grant amnesty to former Confederates, but actually effectively lifted the ban in Section 3 on insurrectionists holding office by granting future amnesty to everyone who engages in an insurrection moving forward. I think that is a very weak argument. First of all, as I said before, it would basically mean that Congress was repealing a constitutional amendment, was repealing Section 3 by legislation. That's not really legally possible. But also, I think it defies common sense that when Congress was looking backward and trying to give former Confederates more leeway to run for office, that it was also somehow looking ahead to the future, granting this permanent amnesty to insurrectionists who participated in an insurrection that hadn't even happened yet. I think that's a very weak argument. I don't think it's one that the Supreme Court will embrace.
What's the strongest argument that you think Trump has to avoid disqualification in these instances?
Well, I think the strongest argument is a policy argument, not a legal argument, which is that we're in uncharted territory here, and removing the top Republican contender from the ballot would shatter a lot of people's belief in democracy, including, I think, a lot of non-Trumpists who believe that whatever the 14th Amendment says, the American people deserve to have a vote here, and that a handful of judges and state officials shouldn't be able to unilaterally remove him from the ballot. But the Supreme Court says...
Let me just say something. I mean, that is a typical liberal, namby-pamby, living constitution. That's not what the text says.
Exactly
Mark.
right.
That is not what the text says. And I am a newfound originalist and textualist, and I don't care what the outcomes are. That's not my job as the judge to think about what the implications of any type of ruling are. I'm just going by what's in the text by the founding fathers of the framers of our Constitution. And so
balls and strikes, baby.
Balls and strikes.
So, I mean, you got me. I don't know what to say. I think that you've also kind of got the quandary that the Supreme Court is in because, of course, the originalist conservative majority has claimed that they don't care about policy or politics or even outcomes, right? In the big Second Amendment case 2 years ago when the court struck down bans on open carry, it said, look, judges shouldn't even look to whether gun restrictions are saving lives. It is not our business whether this has a positive outcome. All that we can look at is what people understood this to mean in 1791. And so I think if you go by that reasoning, there are really very few good arguments to keeping Trump on the ballot. I think there are few good arguments why Trump should be able to remain. I think that the original meaning of Section 3 was very clearly designed to be anti-democratic in a sense, right? The people who ratified Section 3 of the 14th Amendment thought that maybe the future voters of America couldn't be trusted to keep insurrectionists out of office. And so we needed a constitutional bar, just like they thought we needed a constitutional bar on presidents running and holding office for more than 2 terms or running for office before the age of 35. There are other restrictions in the Constitution. This appears to be one of them. I will say, if I'm just putting my legal hat on, I think that the best constitutional argument that Trump has here is that the way this has gone so far in Colorado and Maine, maybe in a few more states, we'll see, it does feel rather freewheeling and improvised. What the voters in Colorado did who challenged Trump's placement on the ballot was use this procedure that's usually done to say, like, a school board candidate isn't sitting in the right district. Like, their house is a mile over the line, and so they can't run for the school board seat. They used that process to force a hearing on whether Trump engaged in insurrection and was thus disqualified from holding office. A lower court state trial judge in Colorado held that hearing, drew her conclusions, and basically that was the basis of the Colorado Supreme Court's decision. A similar thing in Maine. The Maine Secretary of State held a very informal hearing. Evidence was put forth, and she just sort of decreed, yes, this was an insurrection, and Trump incited it. That's not usually what due process entails. Certainly not for criminal matters. This is not a criminal matter. It's more like a civil matter. But even then, I'm concerned that there aren't any clear safeguards here that would, for instance, prevent a red state from trying to weaponize its own judiciary to keep, say, Joe Biden off the ballot by claiming that he aided the enemy by allowing too many migrants to cross the border and persuading a ultra-conservative judge in state Supreme Court to knock him off the ballot. I think that what we would really like to see here is Congress step in and define these terms and define the specific process by which Section 3 is applied. If that happened, I think everybody challenging Trump would be on much firmer ground. In the absence of that, it does feel a little bit iffy to me.
That part also, that's where I think I think that's ultimately where they're going to rule. I mean, that to me strikes me too. Like, to have a magistrate determine what the threshold is for insurrection at that point. But what if the Supreme Court finds that, like, the process in which to determine, even though it's not necessarily, you don't have to get to the bar of a criminal charge here, because it's just a classification of something relative, not as to whether they go to jail, but whether they're eligible, if they're insurrection-y enough to not be eligible for the ballot. But what if, like this case that Jack Smith is involved in, the election interference one? I mean, what if it's found that he's not immune from it and he's found guilty? And I don't think that case will actually be resolved in time. But theoretically, would the Supreme Court be basically saying, like, we're going to bring this back down, and we need a better process for how to determine the insurrection? Because they can't also say there is no provision here, like that part of the Constitution is like an appendix. Like, it's just some vestige of a bygone era, and it's not doing anything. So there, we never pay attention to the 14th Amendment, to the Section 3, unless Congress does something else, right? I mean, they can't really say that, can they?
Well, I mean, they can say that. They have said that about the Establishment Clause and the separation of church and state, for instance. But I take your point. And I think that the deeper concern here from the justice's perspective would be that they would kick the can down the road if they did that, rather than sort of definitively resolve this, at least for the 2024 election. If they say there wasn't enough process, or this wasn't defined clearly enough, or we aren't entirely sure what this means and we need more hearings or briefings or research or whatever, that just gives progressives more space and time to come back around and say, okay, well, we did everything you asked, and we still think that Trump needs to be removed from the ballot. I think that if the court takes this route, what it'll probably say is that Section 3 is not self-executing. That is a legal term, which means that Congress actually has to pass legislation that specifically enforces the insurrectionist bar through a very specific process. Congress would have to define what insurrection means, again, sort of lay out how you can go to court and challenge someone, how states can have the authority to remove somebody from the ballot. That would be, I think, essentially killing off Section 3, because we all know Congress isn't going to do that. When will there ever be 60 votes in the Senate to enforce Section 3 by creating this kind of structure? But it would be a kind of statesman-like way, I'm using air quotes there, for John Roberts to resolve this case while pretending to adhere to the Constitution, but really addressing the underlying policy concerns.
Okay, let's move to Idaho. They have a complete ban on abortion, essentially. And the Biden administration, in an attempt to at least have some leeway for women to get an abortion, even in those states that are not, that have banned it, essentially reminded states that if you have a hospital that operates and receives Medicare money, which is just about every
They all
hospital
do. Yeah.
In the country, that there is a provision there that emergency care must be given, if necessary, and that includes abortions, if a doctor deems that a woman is in a state of emergency. Now, in a practical terms, that's difficult because in the same way that these supposed exceptions in abortion laws are so vague that it puts doctors in a position where they're like, this is never a binary cut and dry thing. I'm going to have to go and make an argument that like a 60% emergency, a 50% emergency, a 70% emergency is a real emergency, or 30% or 40%, whatever. And I could lose my license. I could go to jail if I do this. So from a practical standpoint, it's a little bit secondary. But as a legal standpoint, this is the case that the Supreme Court is going to have to look at, right?
Yes, the Supreme Court has taken up this case and will decide exactly what federal law requires. I think you described the facts well. I would just say this statute says that hospitals have to provide stabilizing care to a patient in emergency distress to resolve their medical emergency. Idaho law, like a bunch of other abortion bans, says that you can't terminate a pregnancy until basically the patient is dying. They're either very close to death or very close to permanent impairment of organs or other major bodily functions, which is another way of describing close to death, right? So there's a delta between those two standards. You stabilize a patient before they're that close to death. And what the Biden administration is saying is, look, federal law is supreme over state law. So Idaho law might say you can't terminate a failing pregnancy until the patient is dying. But federal law says that you have to provide stabilizing care when they're in distress, but not yet at the point of death. So we think that federal law reigns supreme. The Constitution says so as well. And we think that it preempts any kind of state law, whether it's Idaho or Texas or some other red state, that forces women much closer to the brink of demise. A federal judge in Idaho agreed with the Biden administration. Different federal judges in Texas disagreed with the Biden administration. The Supreme Court has now stepped in and will resolve the case. A rather ominous sign, though, is that while doing that, the Supreme Court actually stayed the Idaho decision that had sided with the Biden administration. So for the past year plus, if you had a failing pregnancy in Idaho, you had a right to stabilizing care, including an abortion when necessary, because of this ruling. The Supreme Court just lifted that ruling, which means that Idaho law kicks back in, and you have to be much closer to the point of serious organ impairment or death before you can obtain emergency treatment. I am not optimistic about how this case will turn out at the Supreme Court. The signs are pretty bleak, but I guess hope springs eternal.
Can we just talk about how much BS is involved in the idea that you can stabilize someone on the brink of death? Like, I mean, what does that mean? Like, at what point? Like, I mean, if we just look at this, like, you know, this is the whole fallacy of this whole thing, too, right? Like, when is someone about to fall off a cliff? Are they like, you know, is it 1 foot over? Is it 90% of their body weight that is over that cliff? I mean, what? There's no, this is all subjective.
And if there's also this legal threat to the person who's supposed to pull you back from the cliff, that if they are not sufficiently close to falling off the cliff, that you could face literal prosecution or loss of your license if you don't let that percentage get a little high to meet that threshold.
Right. So this is the problem and vividly illustrated in Texas, which has a 99-year prison sentence for any doctor who provides an abortion that does not fall under the state's extremely narrow medical exception. Doctors are looking at patients coming in. They have infections. They are bleeding out. They have amniotic fluid leaking. Their pregnancies are clearly doomed. And the doctors say, look, I don't want to go to prison for 99 years, so I am legally obligated to wait until you develop sepsis or you are hemorrhaging before I can legally terminate that pregnancy. You know, the state has come back and said, that's not true. These doctors are misreading the law. We would never pass a law like that. But then when Kate Cox actually went to court and said, I have a failing pregnancy. I am bleeding. I have amniotic fluid dripping down my legs. I need an abortion. The Texas Attorney General swiftly went to court to block her abortion and, in fact, issued a threat to every medical professional in the state of Texas and said, if you provide an abortion to Kate Cox, we will prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law.
I wish you had better news for us, Mark, but it sort of feels like consistent with every conversation we've had for several years now.
Can I say one positive thing? One sort of positive
sure.
thing? I think that the Supreme Court will deny immunity to Trump in his criminal trial. This is something that I know you mentioned earlier. It's obviously a big topic. The Supreme Court doesn't seem to be in a huge rush, but I really do think there will be a lopsided majority vote to deny Trump immunity. And I think there's a real chance that that decision could come down with enough time for Trump to be held to a criminal trial in the District of Columbia. Not sure on that last part. You know, the justices can certainly drag their feet when they want to, but this argument for immunity that Trump is making, I think the fact that he's making it so much and so strongly can give the impression that it has any kind of constitutional basis, but it doesn't. It's completely made up out of whole cloth. And even a conservative judge on the DC Circuit, Judge Karen Henderson, recognized that pretty clearly in oral arguments this morning. So, you know, even though a lot of the news right now is bleak, these arguments that Trump's raising to try to scrap these trials altogether, I really don't think it'll hold. And I think even his own appointees on the Supreme Court will recognize that it's bogus.
Isn't it weird too, though, that like Trump's lawyer said Kavanaugh is gonna save us? Does it? I mean, is it me, or is that like the worst thing you could possibly say going into a court case, putting a specific justice on notice that like we expect because you got appointed by Trump that you're going to do what we want? Isn't that the way of basically making that judge go like, oh, geez, there's no way I can rule that way?
Yeah, I don't think that Trump's legal team are the best tacticians. I think that's become very clear in this latest round of litigation. They seem to think that that puts the pressure on Kavanaugh as if to say, you know, remember who saved you, remember who you owe fidelity to. And I guess I would say I do think that Kavanaugh feels some sense of gratitude toward Trump for standing by him during Christine Blasey Ford's allegations of sexual misconduct. But Kavanaugh has this seat for life. He's still going to be there for 30 years. Sorry if that, you know, makes you feel very bad inside. But he doesn't have to do anything for anyone. And so I am skeptical that that kind of statement or any other pressure is going to have any impact on how he decides this case.
That's what I would have thought. Unless, of course, it was Trump who paid off those bills that he had. But I don't think that's him.
Now he has access to the Leonard Leo piggy bank. He can get as much money to pay off his debts as he needs.
Exactly. Mark Joseph Stern, always a pleasure. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Sam. Thanks, Emma.
Yep. Thanks. Mark.
Let's take a quick break, and then we will be right back with more of this show. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Going to head to the fun half soon, but first, it looks like, if you recall, back in December, I guess, was it November or December, there was a Republican Speaker of the House named Kevin McCarthy.
Mm-hmm.
And he was desperate to stay in office and get his time in the sun. And so he agreed with a couple of the Freedom Caucus members to put in a provision where like one person could basically bring him up for a vote. And that happened. The Republicans had about a 8-vote cushion against the Democrats. The Democrats are like, well, we're not going to vote for you to be Speaker of the House because you're from the other party. And why would we do that?
Yeah. And
the McCarthy couldn't get those 9 votes that he needed from Republicans. And so he was ousted. And there was, I don't know, about 5 or 6 failed attempts to elect someone else to be Speaker. And then ultimately they decided on the one of the biggest theocrats in the House, somebody who apparently does not believe in having any interest-bearing bank accounts, so that he doesn't have to reveal his assets to anybody. A guy who is about as extreme as it gets, and certainly is looking to impose a theocracy in this country, but also knows that, you got to lie for the Lord, and the Lord has told us to sometimes you've got to, function as a sheep in wolf's clothing, or a wolf in sheep's clothing, whatever it is. But everyone was talking about how these conservatives have been able to sort of control their party, these 9 people, at different times it was slightly different 9, and bring them to their knees. And it turns out, well, that didn't happen, really. There are 2 deadlines for funding to run out for the government. One is on January 19th. The second one is in the first week of February. And there are different things that are going to run out of money at different times. There's a partial government shutdown on the 19th and the full government shutdown by February 2nd. Mike Johnson has come to a deal with Chuck Schumer on how to fund the government. Now, the thing that everybody agrees on is that we need a massive, massive military budget that dwarfs like all of the rest of the nation of the world's military budgets combined.
Right. Because,
of course, of some looming threat. Like, let's say, I don't know, we're invaded from outer space. We need to spend almost $900 billion on our military, And that's just the money that is like on that line item. There's a lot of other things that are sort of end up feeding into the military from other directions. Our discretionary budget, our non-military discretionary budget, I should say, is closer to $775 billion. So basically,
the rest of it.
The rest of it. And this does not include the non-discretionary, which is like Social Security and Medicare. Fortunately, that stuff is sort of sequestered away. But Mike Johnson announced that they struck a deal and they cut whatever it was. And it turns out that no, all he did was follow almost the exact same deal that Kevin McCarthy had. The big change was, you'll remember in the Inflation Reduction Act, the Democrats passed $80 billion to beef up the IRS over the course of 10 years. Some people were very upset about that because they're libertarians or they're conservatives and they don't believe that the U.S. government should be collecting taxes. But the IRS has been going after wealthier people. They have been, the Treasury Secretary made a vow that we're not going to go after anybody making less than $400,000. You can look at graphs and look when the IRS gets defunded, the number of people who are on the lowest end of the income spectrum get an increase in scrutiny because it's much cheaper to go after them. That's the low-hanging fruit. It's like literally like in terms of, because for every dollar that you spend with the IRS, you get an average about $6 in return. But if they don't have the funding to go after complex cases, which is what rich people have because they have lawyers and accountants to hide their money, It's essentially like I can pick up a bunch of fruit that's on the ground, that's fallen off the tree. The quality of that fruit and the amount of fruit I'm going to get from it, because I have to cut off the pieces that are rotten, is going to be less, but I can do more volume. But if I could go and reach the fruit that is higher up, I'm going to get bigger payload there, but I don't have the money for the cherry pickers, essentially.
Yeah.
That's the metaphor. But with that said, $80 billion over 10 years, the Democrats agreed with McCarthy in a deal where they would cut 20 billion of that 80 billion, and they would do it over 2 years. Well, Mike Johnson has got that 20 billion in 1 year so that he can claim that he cut the budget more and sell it to conservatives. The problem is he knows he's full of it. He didn't even tell his Republican colleagues that he was doing it, which they're pissed about.
Yeah.
And it looks like we're back to the drawing board where the Republicans are, some of these conservatives are going to shut down the government. After all that, they got nothing of what they wanted.
Can I read you this quote from Punchbowl? According to Jake Sherman of Punchbowl, this is from a very well-connected House Republican. Significant concerns growing about Mike's ability to jump to this level and deliver conservative wins. Growing feeling that he's in way, way over his head. As much as there was valid criticism and frustration with Kevin, Mike is struggling to grow into the job and is just getting rolled even more than McCarthy did. It's almost as if your conservative demands are not viable right now because, one, when the government shuts down, Republicans get blamed. We understand this. The White House understands this as well. Two, because there is a Democrat in the presidency and a Democratic-controlled Senate. So all of the stuff that was unrealistic for Kevin McCarthy is unrealistic for Mike Johnson as well.
Without a doubt. And now all we have is the idea of a government shutdown driven by Republicans happening deeper into the election year, as it were. If I'm one of these Republicans from one of the 18 seats where the district voted for Biden but elected a Republican, I'm getting a little bit nervous here. And of course, if I'm a government worker or I am, trying to make a budget for the year 2024, I'm also worried. I mean, let's be clear. When there's a government shutdown, federal workers suffer. The working class suffers. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of federal workers are now freaking out because they're not sure. They can't go to their landlord and say, hey, man, I'm not going to get paid for a period of time. That's also true of federal contractors, people who work for federal contractors. I'm not talking about the people who own these contracts, like the people who work for them. There's all sorts of fallout from this, but you have a bunch of nihilists who are, in that government. And, it's one thing if you're trying to leverage it so that maybe we don't spend $900 billion on weaponry, which none of them are interested in cutting it whatsoever. It's like literally almost like an embarrassment for the Pentagon when they ask for a figure and then all the politicians come back with, you know what? You need about 10% more than that. So this is the situation. It's not getting the attention it was getting, before, I think in part because the press sort of moved on from that story, but we are 7 days out from that next government shutdown. And then we are 2 weeks out from the full government shutdown. So this is going to be increasingly more of a story, and we will talk about that. And I'm just being informed on the IM. I don't know if this is true. I got to double check on this. But it wasn't just Yellen promising to go after folks under 400, not to go after folks under 400,000. It was literally written into the legislation. It's not surprising.
Yeah.
They run that agency like what it does, and they want to show that they get returns for their essentially their investment, and their returns are going after wealthy people who have very sophisticated ways of hiding how much money they owe in taxes.
Do you think a wealthy person is going to sue and say you're discriminating against me because I'm wealthy?
I don't know if you can sue the government on those grounds. Well, I don't know that
the Koch
frankly,
brothers do a lot of like when they like will support different constitutional things for minority rights, and if you dig a little bit deeper, they mean like the ultra rich.
Oh yeah,
minority.
Oh yeah, there may be something. Expert dog kisser, are you saying we could bankrupt defense contractors by shutting down the government long enough? I mean, probably. But you would also be, simultaneously making sure that kids don't get lunch or healthcare or daycare. You would.
They have a bit more of a war chest to try to last that out than.
Let's put it this way: they would be the last people who are bankrupt when you're done. They would be the last people, and then they would also figure out a way of like protecting their shareholders' value.
Yeah, you can't deal with them without taking over the government.
No.
So we will be following that. A couple other stories that bear mentioning before we go into the fun half. The European Climate Agency called Copernicus said that the 2023 was 1.48 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times. That is, I think you can figure this out, just barely below 0.02 degrees Celsius below the 1.5 Celsius limit that the world helped to stay within in the 2015 Paris Climate Accord. Of course, we left that accord in 2016 when Donald Trump came into office. To avoid the most severe effects of climate warming. January 2024 is on track to be so warm that for the first time in a 12-month period will exceed that 1.5 degree threshold. In other words, the planet is not really aware that we start the year on January 1 and ended on December 31st. The trailing 12 months of January at this point, if January maintains its global climate, its global temperature, then we'll have hit it for a 12-month period of time.
And I should say, June through the end of the year last year was the warmest recorded temperatures on record for that particular time period.
And, just to be fair, to help out, and so that we're not going to be, I don't want to be spreading, climate change misinformation.
Right.
We should say that this only goes back to, they can only be sure about this for about, 125,000 years. So
you need to see some more data.
Yeah, we can't confirm before then, but
here is the point about that. Even because 50% of this country, we have a major political party that still sort of denies any of this in some fashion or another. The most important thing to understand in terms of the implications of this is that whether it was 125,000 years ago or 4 million years ago or 1 million years ago or even like 75,000 years ago, or even 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 years ago, we have built our civilization, our cities, the means in which we get power and water and et cetera, around the way that the climate was in pre-industrial times. So really 200 or 300 years ago was when a lot of this stuff was, in some instances, different countries have been around for longer, cities have been around for longer. But the point is that we have built cities in places which we cannot sustain. And
so even if this were the natural order of things and we're just going into Ice Age Part 2 because of God or whatever, as opposed to our own human consumption, it still doesn't really change the material realities of what we're dealing with.
That's right.
Is
That's right.
our urban centers, our major ports, our most densely populated areas are subject, and let alone, of course, like the global South, which will bear the brunt of capitalist excess. They're still facing that reality, regardless of the what created it, even though we know what created it.
Also, another story. This one's a little bit more encouraging, but not necessarily of the same scope, I guess, I would say. And that is that the Labor Department has issued a new rule where gig workers will qualify as employees. And this is the Biden labor. We're talking about millions of gig workers, janitors, home care workers, possibly construction workers, and truckers. It essentially requires employers to extend benefits and protections to workers classified employers. One of the greatest sources of wage theft, and also sort of like deferred wage theft in the form of Social Security, has been to misclassify workers. And the rule is going to get obviously challenged by various companies, including Uber and Lyft and all those other like gig economy things. This rule rescinds a Trump era rule that made it easier for employers to classify workers as independent contractors. It revised a test for determining whether a worker is an employee or an independent contractor who is self-employed under the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. So this is a really newfangled way in which I'm joking.
Yeah.
And we'll see.
But it's good. I mean, and this follows certain, like in New York, they just established, and it just went into effect, I think, in 2024 or late 2023, minimum wage standards for gig workers as well. So I think there are a lot of cities realizing that it was entirely unsustainable for them to not pay these workers at least some minimum wage.
And we should make it clear, this is a restoration of a rule that was promulgated under the Obama administration. The way that the Trump administration changed it is that they basically said there's two sort of factors that are determinative of whether someone is a contractor or an employee. One is how much control the company has over its workers and how much entrepreneurial opportunity factored into the job. This new rule essentially makes it easier for workers to gain employee status. And that's going to make a big difference in terms of like, in terms of pay and whether they get Social Security benefits. That's a very important, element of all of this. I can tell you for, I don't know how many years it was when we started this show. Everybody who was paid on it was paid as a contractor. In some instances, like, I'm paid as a contractor because I've had since my showbiz days, an S corp because I get paid from different places. But the switch from as an employer, if I pay you as a contractor, I give you a 1099 and I don't have to pay half of your Social Security payments. So from my perspective as an employer, I'm going to save money that way by misclassifying you. However, you, when you get to be 65 or 67, depending on your age now, are going to find like, I didn't get Social Security. I wasn't paid into Social Security. I'm going to get less in retirement. So it is much better for, in my estimation, everyone except for the person who wants to save some money and get cheaper, that you get classified as an employee in terms of your Social Security, in terms of your Medicare, and also in terms of protections. So,
yes, good news.
I farted. Sam said he works as an escort. I didn't say that. Did I say that? No, I didn't.
Yeah. I mean,
Holtenheim says Emma suppressing a yawn while Sam talks about Social Security will always be funny. Yeah, well, she's not the only one, I can assure you.
Did I?
Did you suppress it? Or did you have a...
Well, it sounds like I didn't suppress it very effectively, if that's the case.
Also, lastly, let's just talk about this. Oh, and before, I got one more story about what's about people getting bumped off Twitter right now. But
they are back on, by the way.
Oh, they are?
After.
All right, well, wait, let's get to this in a second, because Emma is going to be out at in San Francisco area. When? Like the weekend of the 27th? I know that's when it is, because that's when I have my high school reunion.
It's the 28th. It'll be on the Sunday. So if we have any fans, audience members in the Bay Area, everyone should go check me out doing a live show with our friend Francesca Fiorentini. Oh my gosh, it just got sold out. Hold on, let's see. Click on it. The event has ended. No way.
Maybe,
did I send the right link?
That's Sunday, January 22nd. That's from last year.
Oh,
I must have sent the wrong link.
Oh, maybe no, that might not be the right link that you sent. So let me make sure
that is not the right link.
That came up on Google. So let me find the right.
Yeah. No, the one I sent is definitely, I don't think.
Well, here's the point. It sold out last year, folks. So you better get on it right now.
Yes, it's called Sketchfest. It's in San Francisco. I'm not a comedian, but Francesca is, and it's a comedy festival. I'll be on stage with her on Sunday night, so everyone should come check it out. I tweeted out the link, and it'll be in the description, right, for people that are paying attention. So 7 p.m. Sunday, January 28th, I will be in San Francisco at the
Here we go.
The Gateway Theater in San Francisco for Sketchfest. It'll be Francesca, Nato Green, Miles Gray, and myself. Come check us out, folks. Tickets are $25 is $25, $35 if you want to be in front and center. Sunday, January 28th at 7 p.m.
And the People's Prof on IM just said you've got UC Davis professor fans with tickets in hand looking forward to seeing Emma.
Woo! All right. That'll be fun.
All right, let's just quickly, apparently, Twitter had suspended a bunch of accounts ranging from Ken Klippenstein to what was the squirrel one?
Z Squirrel.
I was wondering, basically 80% of the accounts I follow.
I know.
Rob Rousseau, who we regularly raid on Twitch.
Yes, Rob Rousseau. The Squirrel account, which is a wonderfully provocative leftist account aggregator.
Alan McLeod from Mint, right? Mint Press. And
basically accounts that have been pro-Palestinian or at least reporting
Ken Klippenstein. I mean, also this whole pro-Palestinian. It's like the baseline is being anti genocide and ethnic cleansing.
Yes, I mean I'm being broad there, but in the end, it's not just that. It was also seemingly reporters who were critical of that billionaire Bill Ackman and who were tweeting out things about his wife's alleged plagiarism after he was leading the charge to oust Claudine Gay from Harvard because of those trumped up kind of...
I believe Z Squirrel said on a Discord that they believe that Ackman was had Elon's ear. I sometimes think TrueAnon also got suspended. They're back, I think, as well. I think it's... All those people also talk about how Kimball Musk has Epstein connections himself. Kimball Musk being Elon's brother. So I don't know. I sometimes wonder if maybe Elon didn't need a whole lot of suggestion.
And I also think what happens is some people get thrown in to throw people off the scent of why certain people got suspended.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it remains to be seen. We will see what's happened with that. But
Well,
at least Ken is celebrating the new Substack subscribers that he's gained out of this.
And the update is that basically when they got unbanned after Elon Musk responded to old friend of the show, Jackson Hinkle, saying, why are accounts critical of Israel being suspended? Elon says, I will investigate. Obviously, it is okay to be critical of anything, but it is not okay to call for extreme violence, as that is illegal.
Yeah, none of those people did.
And then
also, just to be clear,
yeah.
Emma's being facetious when she refers to Jackson Hinkle as an old friend of the show.
Oh, yes, certainly. But the point is just like Stephen Monacelli, who is a reporter for the Texas Observer, responded and said it appears the reason I was unbanned is that Elon Musk responded to a post by Jackson Hinkle, a far-right influencer who regularly posts misinformation and conspiracy theories. That being the reason that he's responsive to it.
That's just Monticelli's theory.
That's his theory, but that was the only seemingly public response there, and then within a few minutes they were unbanned.
There's you've got Vice writing about it. You got other people writing about it, and
sure.
I imagine there were phone calls from various news outlets. And so what is more relevant is that would be that if Musk tried to make it look like he was being responsive to that person,
yes,
as opposed to anywhere else. I find it hard to believe that Twitter was not aware that other people were reporting on it as of this morning. So we'll see.
But, he wanted to make Twitter the town square that you have to pay a subscription fee to be highlighted on and platformed and boosted. And also certain kinds of speech, we're going to ban you for that unceremoniously without letting anybody know. And unless there is some sort of media response, that'll go completely under the radar. And because the only reason that people are back because of the backlash.
Bug Chasing Sam says arrests have been made at Chabad headquarters in New York in an operation by the state to close secret tunnels. I need to read more into that. I've heard about it. I don't get it, but I guess we'll find out about it shortly. All right, we're going to take a break. Head into the fun half of the program. Just a reminder: it's your support that makes the show possible. We cannot do it without you, folks. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the fun half, you get the free half free of commercials, but most importantly, you allow us to continue to do what we're doing. So if you listen to the program once or twice a week or more, head over to jointhemajorityreport.com and become a member. It is our members that make this show possible. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, featuring the Majority Report blend, but they have other blends too that are also great. Use the coupon code MAJORITY, you get 10% off. Emma, ESVN.
Well, I did a little bit of a stream yesterday previewing the college football championship. Congrats to Michigan.
Dude.
Exactly. And broke down some of the playoff matchups, the results from Sunday. On Thursday, Matt Leck will be joining me. We will have a little bit of a hybrid show for ESVN. He'll be helping me out with the tech while Bradley is out. We'll talk a little basketball, and I will give my predictions for the weekend now that the playoffs are kicking off. YouTube.com/ESVN show.
Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Yeah, tonight on Left Reckoning, Sudeep Bhattacharya is on to talk about Asian American politics and Dave Rubin, for instance, including Asian Americans as one of the people that are discriminated against in this country on top of white people and Jewish people. And we'll also be talking about the German trucker or German farmer protests. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get access to that tonight.
See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back. back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back, 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 back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back, 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 back.
You are a madman!
And the alpha males are back, back.
Oh no, Sam Cedar, what a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them, just put them in rotation.
DJ Denner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs that look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males.
Psych. Fuck them. Fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black African. And the alpha males are black, 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 black. And the Africans are back, 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 back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck them. Fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy!
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black. Alpha males are black, black. Africans are back, back.
Come on! Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy. Pussy.
Damien on the IM. Welcome to the fun half, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sam Cedar. I am here with Emma Vigland. And,
hello.
Matt Leck is here, and Bradley's still apparently on his honeymoon. That's a good sign that he's not back early. Demian.
Without commenting on it?
Yeah.
What's that?
He just shows up to work.
Just shows up a week and a half early.
Weren't you supposed to come back in a week?
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it.
Ready to go.
Yeah.
Demian, with Sam and Hassan's chat last Friday after the show,